Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
Dumelang, welcome to the second hour of the Clement Manyathela Show, the special edition of the show, because we're live to you from Washington, D.C. in America. I'm not so far from the White House, and that's where the focus will be tomorrow, that crucial meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump. And that's why we're here. This is probably the most important meeting for us since the official meeting that President Mandela back in the 90s had with President Bill Clinton. There is so much that's happened that has deteriorated the relationship between South Africa and the United States. And tomorrow is D-Day. Are we going to have a deal or not? Do we have a plan to engage with an unconventional leader like President Donald Trump? Do we have any tricks up our sleeves? Well, the president will be joined by Mfebisi Jonas, his envoy to the US. He'll be joined by Minister Lamula, DERCO Minister John Steenhuisen, the Minister of Agriculture. As I said to you earlier on, there is a plan here to try and open up US markets to more agricultural goods that are coming out of South Africa. So agribusiness is quite an exciting area of opportunity and partnerships for US companies, and John Steenhuisen is here to push for those deals. You also have the Minister of Trade and Industry, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, the Minister in the Presidency, is also here. We're hearing that Elon Musk may join that meeting tomorrow. Is he going to be asking questions about Starlink? Who knows? But right now, our team is going to be meeting today. They'll be discussing what approach they're going to be taking when our president meets with the US president tomorrow. And 702 will be there to bring you all the highlights. Let's start this conversation now, this hour, with Vincent Magwenya, who is the spokesperson for the president. I went over to the president's hotel where the president is staying last night, and I was able to talk to some of the presidency team members, and I had a chat with Vincent Magwenya, and I was asking exactly the questions I've been asking this morning. What are we prepared to give or concede to, and what are we prepared not to concede to? What are the non-negotiables for us? Because we're dealing with a leader who is quite transactional. Here's how that conversation went.
Vincent, thank you so much for making time for us. It's good to see you here in Washington, D.C.
Good to see you too, Clement. Thank you.
So how's the president feeling about the meeting on Wednesday? He seemed like he's in high spirits. How is he feeling generally?
He's in high spirits, highly enthused, looking forward to the opportunity to meet with President Trump, looking forward to researching the relationship in the best interest of the country, our economy. He is duty-bound to protect livelihoods, to create the jobs that need to be created. And as we know, the U.S. market, the U.S. economy is a critical element of that ambition and that process. Mm-hmm. And so we need to reset the relationship, enjoy the benefits of the strategic relationship, but more importantly, iron out issues of concerns that may exist, albeit some of them based on disinformation. They need to be ironed out so that we can move forward with greater clarity in terms of what does this relationship look like outside of the tensions that have unfortunately characterized it since the start of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and we'll talk about trade in a moment. Speaking of just disinformation, how is he planning to address the disinformation around the so-called genocide and the 59 refugees, quote unquote, that were accepted and welcomed by the US? Because at some point, the president of the US doesn't really interact much with the truth, because he's been told several times that is not true, and yet he still believes it is true. So is there a plan to try get the real facts to him?
Well, I guess the first point will be to maybe understand the issue from his perspective. So, what exactly has he been told? What makes him so assertive about what he believes is happening in South Africa? Because we've had what we've had from his pronouncements addressing the media, his social media postings and so on. But when you engage one-on-one, you get the opportunity to actually allow the person to elaborate further in terms of what they think they understand. And then you are able to deal with their assertions one by one, and you counter them with facts, so to speak. So it's a part of the discussion that the president is hoping does not take up too much time, because there are far more important elements of the discussion that are central to the relationship than this issue.
What would make him happy? So if the president gets in there and explains, would he be happy if the president of the US says, I hear you, or says, I'm going to review how we are approaching this program, refugee program? What would make the president happy? What would be his ask?
Well, I guess President Ramaphosa's ask will... No, let me put it this way. The expectation is for President Trump to accept the facts as presented. Number one. Number two, understand that what we have as a challenge in South Africa is a general crime problem that affects all groups. Even when you look at the numbers of farm murders in the past 4 years. We say one murder is one too many. But if you look at the farmers, you're looking at about 53, 50 or so. The large number of people that have been affected through farm killings have been farm dwellers, majority of which all are black. And so those are the kinds of facts President Ramaphosa will put on the table and try and contextualize the real challenge that we have, which we're not in denial about. And that's the crime problem that we have. And the president will then take him through the approaches that we've utilized in other areas where law enforcement has been able to get a handle on, and talk him through how those approaches are being utilized to deal with the problem of murders in general, right? And hopefully that will then resonate, because it will be a far more elaborate discussion. It will not just be us denying that white people are being persecuted. It will be us painting a picture to him in terms of, we have a crime problem. What are the social contributors to that problem? What have we been doing to resolve it? And what are we going to do going forward? And hopefully, Clement, with that kind of context and articulation, there will then be a better appreciation of what is really happening in South Africa. And then we can move past the issue.
And even if they continue with the program and they take more Afrikaners, so would you hope that post that explanation there can be a review?
Well, if you look at this so-called refugee program, it has its own dimension and its own issues. If they continue, they'll probably continue under the guise of the same, sort of disinformation. But in essence, I think over time, it's going to become clear as to what's motivating this program from their perspective. And obviously, Clement, there are people at home who are not going to miss the opportunity for a free plane ticket being resettled in the U.S. without the hassle of going through what real deserving refugees go through, right? And so it's a political process in our view that at some point the Americans will have to come clean about, right? As a government, we can't prevent people from leaving, but we will express our displeasure at people who live under false pretenses and people who live under the guise of things that are not happening in our country, right? But it's a line that remains, or let me put it this way, it's going to be difficult for the Trump administration to sustain this so-called genocide in South Africa. It's going to be very difficult. And the burden of proof is going to ultimately fall on the US to substantiate these claims. The entire world, Clement, is in South Africa in various ways. The tourists that visit South Africa from different parts of the world, the diplomatic representation that we have in South Africa, we have the second highest number of foreign missions in South Africa after Washington. We are the second country to the United States that is host to the Vatican through an embassy, or rather an embassy or a mission representing the Vatican. We have various UN agencies headquartered in Pretoria, regional offices. We have World Bank regional offices. We have U.S. government footprint in South Africa. Consulate in Durban, which is reportedly going to be closed down, a consulate in Cape Town, a consulate in Johannesburg, an embassy which even has U.S. law enforcement representatives, which is perfectly permissible within the ambit of the bilateral relations. And so there's absolutely no ways that the Trump administration does not know that what they are propagating is false. They know. And so at some point we need to get to the bottom of the real politics behind this and agree that we need to move on past this whole issue. And if they're looking for farming expertise, they must say so. We're not quite sure if the people they took are real farmers, right? And we're not quite sure if the people they're going to take in the next round, if they continue, are going to be real farmers. But the political motivation is there, and at some point they need to come out and articulate what that political position is.
Yeah. Do you know yet who's going to form part of the U.S. delegation?
No, we don't know yet, but we anticipate that Secretary of State Rubio will be at that meeting. There were some murmurs around Elon Musk being part of the meeting. We're not quite sure that that will be the case. And from our understanding, the vice president is out of the country, if I'm not mistaken. And so, we're not concerned about who joins the meeting. We're excited at the opportunity that finally the two heads of states will have the opportunity to engage directly. And they'll each put their perspectives on the table, not only with respect to issues of concern, but with the kind of opportunities that we see going forward.
Yeah. What are some of those opportunities? Part of the delegation is not just the DIRCO Minister Lamola, you've got the Minister of Trade and Industry, you've got the Agriculture Minister as well, yes. John Steenhuisen.
Yes.
What was the thinking around, especially John Steenhuisen? Is there an opportunity here to talk about how you can have access to a broader U.S. market and have agricultural goods leaving South Africa having more market here?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an opportunity for mutually beneficial two-way trade in agriculture, right? There are some agricultural products that the U.S. would like to sell to South Africa, or rather increase their quantities. Equally, we have an interest to open up the U.S. market to more South African goods. And so it is critical that Minister Steenhuisen is here to engage with his counterparts and other officials on those issues, but also to be part of the President's delegation. Should there be an opportunity for him to articulate those opportunities, he will be able to do so. South Africa's agricultural industry is very much export orientated, as you know, and so we will be able to certainly expand the basket of goods, and also grow the existing basket of goods that we are bringing to the United States from an agricultural point of view. And so it's critical that Minister Steenhuisen is here. But I think also, let's be honest, it is opportune. I mean, Minister Steenhuisen is from the DA. He is part of the government of national unity. And so it is an opportune moment for President Ramaphosa to also showcase what this GNU looks like, and what it means to us as South Africans as we seek to work hard to advance our economy.
Yeah, and I mean, he's also white.
He's also white.
And if white people are being persecuted there,
and he can speak for himself. He can say he's safely left his family behind. He's got relatives and cousins all over South Africa, and none of them are living under any threat of persecution. So yes, absolutely. That is almost like an unsaid message that will become quite clear and visible. We saw yesterday the likes of Joel Pollack trying to kind of dismiss his presence, and again displaying a level of ignorance with respect to how our political system works and so on. But it is important that he's here.
Okay, just lastly on the issue of refugees, Marco Rubio has suggested that there's going to be an extension of this refugee program. And I remember how strongly worded the statement from the presidency was when the US took the first 59 Afrikaners. If they do extend this, is this them now continuing to undermine the sovereignty and choosing to discredit what the official channels from South Africa are saying about the presence and the existence of white Afrikaners in South Africa?
Yeah, look, if the program continues, we'll certainly, as a government, and certainly the president, will take exception to it. The fact that President Ramaphosa has traveled all this way to come here shows the seriousness in which he regards this market and the relationship with the United States. For the relationship to succeed and to prosper, it requires both sides to contribute the same amount of effort to make it work. It will not be a sustainable relationship if it's South Africa only that's coming to the party. And so the expectation is that the US government will come to the party with this issue and recognize that there is no basis or justification for such a program. Quite frankly, their articulation is contrary to international law in terms of the standard definition of what is a refugee. And so, Clement, let me rather be positive and be hopeful that after tomorrow's meeting, we will put these issues to rest, and we will focus with more constructive issues that can deliver shared prosperity and can take our respective countries forward.
Yeah, and on AGOA, I mean, with the tariffs that were announced, is this an opportunity to also, because one of the reasons, the president of the US said he's issuing out those tariffs is that he wants to get countries to come to the negotiating table. Are we here to also negotiate on tariffs? Because some of what he announced may mean the end of AGOA when you look at the detail of those tariffs, the universal ones, the specific ones, even on the automotive sector.
Yeah.
What's the plan around that? What are we hoping to walk away from this meeting with?
Yeah, so we can't negotiate tariffs at Wednesday's meeting. Tariffs will have to be, or engagements over tariffs will have to be a separate process that officials at appropriate levels will have to engage over. But here's the principle with respect to AGOA. The president would like to see the extension of AGOA, not only for the benefit of South Africa, but for the benefit of the continent. Remember that even with some of our exports to the United States, the value chain of those exports includes products from other African countries. So the president would like to see the extension of AGOA from that point of view. Secondly, the president would like to see South Africa's continued participation in AGOA. However, if President Trump and his administration have concluded that they want to scrap the trade scheme altogether, as South Africa, we will be ready to then say, here's an outline of a new trade relationship framework that we can engage over, that will be mutually beneficial. Wednesday's meeting becomes important in the sense that it will then set a firm foundation for those negotiations to take place. That's why we keep on referring to the resetting of the relationship. Because once we have a clear understanding that AGOA is going away or we're going to be excluded from AGOA, then it's easy for us to then set the stage for more thorough and detailed talks on a new trade framework. Now, we find that to be as exciting as remaining within the AGOA scheme, because it will then mean we're starting off a blank canvas in terms of shaping the new trade relationship. And the outcome of that process we envisage will be a process that will deliver a fair trade regime on both sides. You may end up with a fair tariff regime for both sides, and you may end up certainly with the kind of growth and expansion of market access that we're looking for in the United States. The U.S. may end up selling more to us in the areas of energy, for example, in agriculture, even in automotive and in technology. Those are areas that they are looking to grow. They are looking for additional markets, and that could open up new opportunities in that sense. And so the end of AGOA is not a doomsday scenario at all for us. We've looked at this and said there are other areas that we can grow our trade which are not part of AGOA. So in a way, AGOA, has boxed us into specific areas that are included. And not all of our trade, by the way, is under the AGOA status. In fact, the majority of our trade with the U.S. is under what is often referred to as the most favored nation status. That's why the bulk of our trade is over 70% of our trade. And then the remainder is largely AGOA, as well as within the sort of WTO trade framework. And so if President Trump says to President Ramaphosa, no, I'm doing away with AGOA, or you're not going to be included, that then presents an opportunity to accelerate a process over engaging on a new trade framework.
Okay.
You're with Clement Manyathela.
7:02.
25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Let's continue that conversation I was having with the presidency spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya.
So South Africans have sort of been concerned about whether or not we may compromise ourselves in the meeting, given that the president of the U.S. is such a transactional leader. I mean, you look at how he's received by countries when he goes on tour in the Middle East. When he welcomes other presidents at the White House, it's almost like he needs something in return. What do we have for him? And, what are we willing to compromise on? What are we willing to transact with? And what are we not willing to transact with, given the kind of person we're dealing with?
No, Clement, there's been a lot of issue made here in the United States about what they often refer to as DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion. The likes of Elon Musk have referred to our redress laws as race-based laws. Now, on that, Clement, you know the kind of processes, statutory processes that we have when we come up with laws, when we amend laws. So, in our constitutional framework, we don't have executive orders. So the president cannot shake hands with any counterpart and say, I'll have this law removed. He cannot. That, in fact, will be illegal for him to even attempt, right? And so with respect to our transformation laws, those laws are not going to change. The best thing we can do is to explain the historical context.
Okay.
and explain where we're trying to take the country to with those laws in terms of ensuring that we level the playing field, and those who are excluded from full economic participation are brought into mainstream economic activity.
Okay.
So that we can happily explain, but there's not going to be any compromise in that regard.
ICJ case, is there a compromise there?
ICJ case, there's a complexity there. No, in fact, there's no complexity. Let me put it this way. Procedurally, that process is far down the line. We cannot withdraw that case. In any event, from a historical principle point of view and present legal sort of obligation, we are a state party to various conventions, including conventions that deal with issues of genocide. And so we are obliged to act, both from a historical perspective, but also from a current legal context, in events where we see or suspect that a genocide may be committed. And so we're not going to withdraw from that case. However, Clement, there's an area of alignment that I must hasten to highlight here, where we're going to find common ground with President Trump. And that is his view with respect to a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Now, we've been at pains in pointing out to the world that there is a humanitarian crisis that is emerging there, and Israel needs to allow for the flow of humanitarian aid, so opening up humanitarian corridors. Now, that cry seems to be landing now in the ears of those in power here in the United States. We've had President Trump pointing to the correct signals around that. And so we will push that issue, and we will offer whatever support we can provide.
Starlink, are we willing to suspend our localization policies, or just to allow for Elon Musk to come and set up business?
Again, Clement, there's no legal provision giving the president that authority or giving the government that authority to suspend an act of law. What we have in that regard is that Minister Malati has been leading a process to look at what kind of regulatory framework do you require for these satellite-based technologies. And so there's no backdoor entry here. And this is something that the president himself explained to Elon Musk, not once, twice, right? I've even had engagements with some of his people, trying to really make them understand how our legal system works and how our statutory processes are managed. They obviously have an issue with, let's say, if we were to amend the act, they have an issue with the fact that it will take 2 years. They feel that that is too long, but that's the way our system works, right? Now, if we were to amend the act, there will have to be very good reasons in terms of what benefit will that do to the sector, number one, our broader economy, as well as our transformation ambitions and aspirations, right? And so we are waiting the conclusion of the process that Minister Malati is currently engaging to then guide how government proceeds with this matter.
But that amendment would also require support in Parliament, wouldn't it?
Well, first of all, you need public consultation. You need to go through all of those emotions. And then you will have to secure enough votes in Parliament. And as you know these days, you never know which way issues go in Parliament in the absence of an absolute majority. And so it's I suppose, for an outsider, it's a complex legal process. For us, it's being compliant and staying within the remit of our constitution.
Yeah. Just lastly, does the president have any trick on his sleeves? Anything that he's going to play at that to somehow break ice or try to meet Mr. Trump somewhere?
Yeah. Clement, I jokingly said to somebody, the president sometimes gets insulted in his own parliament when he goes to parliament for Q&As or when he's about to address SONA, because you have opposition parties that are vocal and quite passionate and emotional about issues. Look, you've seen the president. He's always calm. He's always measured. He thinks through every engagement that he's part of. He listens intently when people speak. He allows them to speak until they're done. And he manages even tense situations with a great deal of respect, elegance, calm, and diplomacy, you name it. And so we're not worried about what may or may not happen tomorrow. We know whatever that will be thrown the president's way will be. He will step up to the challenge that he will face, and so there are no tricks. But you will see the president in his best element, and able to read the room and rise to the challenge.
All right, Vincent Magwenya, thank you so much for making time, and all the best on Wednesday.
Thank you very much, my brother. Thank you.
So that's Vincent Magwenya, the presidency spokesperson, speaking to me ahead of that meeting on Wednesday. We're expecting that meeting to possibly take place around midday, but we're going to get all the technical details sometime later today.